also the kind of reminding me of places like Spain and more of the American Southwest.
Latest shipments is long overdue. The investors are starting to worry. So I hear.
But now they have Eden Park, which is quite spectacular. It's got a lot of amazing features. You can actually see some of the rock wall here at the bridge. I mentioned that heat damage look with the brick. See what I'm talking about here, and then it sort of just jumps to this level here, and it's all smooth. So I mean, I guess you could say it's a different material, probably, maybe, I don't know. Or is there more to the story? I don't know. This is the Bellevue Brewery, one of many breweries. In the Bellevue House, you've seen this as well in a few communities where they have the hilltop house overlooking the town. You can get a sense in these old breweries for sort of the age and the damage, but also how decorative these are. And a lot of these old brewery buildings going back to the early 1800s. And so we're expected to believe that what are these decorations? Keep the birds off. So we're expected to believe that that was just how they built for that time period, right? I think, like I've mentioned, I think we had a completely different existence, and I think it was being has been systematically erased. And now we're at a point where they try to keep us in a state of disbelief, to waking up to this fact that we were much more. Of course, you have to, if you want to control population, you have to convince them that they're useless, and then you have to implant false history in which you can control them. All the authors, the Orwells and Huxleys, they all suggest that false history is very important in controlling the population. So we look at these visuals, and all we can do is just imagine. And again, the puzzle pieces don't fit. So at the very least, we can't say what we know, but we can say what we know is not true. And looking at a lot of the evidence, we're saying this is just not possible. So we know there's a lie. And if we deduce that there's a lie, then how much of it is a lie? Do we give the benefit of the doubt on certain things that we want to hold on to? And are we just holding on to those things? Are we ready to let go of all their deceptions? YMCA, of course you have to build a YMCA like this. You need a tower up there, right? Honestly, what a spectacular city.
These cowboys, I'm tired of them riding through the streets. I see. My wife is going to leave me for a man she met at the docks.
A railway station. Military all done here again. We have a heavy sports narrative, sports and beer. Cincinnati.
Ain't that the way?
First baseball game, apparently. First professional baseball team. First professional baseball game. Red stockings or something like that. It tastes like Reds. I might have that a little bit wrong. I was watching a video yesterday. Here's another high school. So watching a little bit on the history of Cincinnati, which I didn't know much about.
I ain't gonna lie, everybody else high schools do look shitty.
Suggest having a look at this city.
You do got some live built, that's historical looking
I had looked
building.
at some highlights previously.
That's why I fuck with it.
They caught one of the laborers.
That's the only thing that made me really fuck with it.
As my
I
nan
always
used
say
to
this:
say,
the more you dig, the more you can find. Here's a good example. This is a doctor's building. You see all all the detail here on top. So what looks like just a typical rectangular building, having that detail with flare and no doubt we've got some amazing interior finish. Marble floors, I'm guessing, granite columns, detailed ceilings. And I mentioned it before in previous videos too. I don't really get into the interiors too much, just because of the length of videos, right? But when you do see some of the interiors of these places, try to envision even doing those types of interiors in modern day, like getting the stone shipped, getting these tiles milled up perfectly flat, installed perfectly flat. Chamber of Commerce. This one didn't last long. Apparently, 1800s, I think it was. Disappeared in that fire. I think it was. I think that's right. Here you have that flood going on here. What a crazy building. This one's going too far down.
I see vagrants making their beds in the streets at night.
See if I can zoom in here.
Unbelievable.
Can't see it all up all fuzzy, but you can see the actually a little street up here. So, do that before. Let's get into the music hall briefly. This is unbelievable building. Unbelievable. This is an old rendering. I want you to notice the decoration.
Somebody
The gate style features along the bridges, statues.
Yeah, I'm gonna get the fuck out.
Well, we'll get to the rest. I thought we had it all. It's coming up shortly.
Oh, wait, man, nigga thought he had
Section of Cincinnati, also called Over the Vine, I believe. Supposedly has a lot of the old architecture. If you're from this area and you know a bit more about it, throw in some comments and let me know if I'm off. I kind of jump all over the place, all over, especially North America. So, I've never been to a lot of these places. So you notice that I missed the name of
these
the
niggas, nigga, I ain't gonna see these right.
I go through a lot.
Man, they gotta take me out.
Let me know.
They gotta take me out the loop for me to be beat.
Giving you a sense of what's going on in the streets here. Okay, I bring this up a lot too. So this whole narrative, really.
Well, you boy over there against the wall though, just leaning.
Apparently, these streetcars that originally was all built into the infrastructure of Cincinnati before electricity, designed to be pulled by horses. Check the cobbles here, or brick. I'm not sure exactly what we call those. But a huge part of the infrastructure. You can also see the mud-flooded windows here. Except the building goes further down. So this, I'm having a feel that this has been around for a while. They tell us. Anyway, the rail cars apparently all built with the horses pulling them until electricity came in. It's a ridiculous part of there. Here's a little shot of the library. I'll get to that as well. Who's doing that? What did you ask the contractor to do that for you today? What would they say? Part of the University of Cincinnati.
Right.
The shots of the canals.
Look how these niggas keep coming in the lane, bro. Is they scheming, bro? Is they outside this bitch?
Shot of the City Hall. I believe this is St. Peter's. Side brewery. Let's go. Street old one. Okay, old mom.
Give me ice.
Courthouse. Alright, public library. Not looking like too much from the outside. I mean, it still has flair.
But the field of this thing's high.
This is ridiculous. It's an underground in Cincinnati. You can take tours apparently in certain areas. Having these big arched tunnels. There's really ridiculous narrative that they had been planned to build a subway.
What?
And it never fruition, even though they chipped away at it over a span of several decades. It seems like all this wasted infrastructure and money. And when you hear those stories too, it lends to the whole narrative that we're stupid, right? Oh, we tried this, it didn't work out, ran out of money, World War One happened, halted plans. We're just stupid.
Even on the inside, them apartments fire.
Two things and they're stupid. So,
They still just walk to his bedroom, farming his head. We used to live in one of them north side.
Used to be the Longview Hospital. It was an asylum. Sorry.
It's a fucking library.
As well as can be expected.
Eden Park. This would be a reservoir at Eden Park. I mean, really? Seriously? There was that bulging sort of blockwork. Starting to get used to seeing. Of course, you have to have a water tower that looks like it's somewhere in Poland. And the bridge with the rail car over top of it. And this is just standing. You have all the brickwork intact here. 1904, we have a date here.
Damn. That shit's still standing. 100 years later.
Part of the reservoir. I mean, why would oh like that? You got all these Germans that came over. You've seen Germany.
I find dead weights making their beds in the streets at
No wonder it got bumped to smithereens. There's the entrance to this building. So this building not looking like much in the postcard. And then you've got this actual. This is what I was talking about with the finishes. There's so much more than just these exterior visuals. There's so much that
what school is that?
Erased, destroyed. They love the old wrecking ball. Here's the school. Now, doesn't this feel like somewhere to our minds, our schooled minds? Another picture of the damage from the fire. I do have a video coming, so I can Can a fire really do that?
Nigga.
Can a fire do that?
He lying as hell.
Rip through the brick.
My
impression of a fire is that you're just going to have black smoke out the windows, but I would suspect the brick walls would stay intact.
Yeah, no.
Here you're getting a good sense of red on top, red down the side, red in between, and some change here.
What's that mean?
Getting old.
What the hell that mean?
Another hotel. That's the interiors of these places.
That's just
A bit of an interior
that's
shot here.
the
A little
arm.
bits in this one. There's the curvature of the ceiling. I mentioned this in previous videos. Not an easy thing to accomplish, this type of work. And of course you have these very ornate chandeliers as well. At a time when electricity was in its infancy. So
I don't want nothing to do with this one.
looking like again somewhere in France.
Fact. It ain't even because he's not better.
Gotta put it together. I don't know how you can't see it at this point. It's ridiculous. Even this. If you put together plans for a hotel, I want the dining area, have these columns, these arched ceilings. I want that. What's that going to cost? Architect drew it up. You're going to get laughed at.
He got lucky as
Time
fuck.
and money.
Which I mean, I do the whole like shit. I just do it like that. I just do it like that then.
Gold world.
I just bet the whole hand like that.
As well. The
And the rest of it, let's just get this shit over with. I might as well just hand me our money now, but
this giving you a good view of the different stages here. You see here, it's
your
hard to
money,
tell.
especially him.
Is
Don't
this
sit
supposed to
down.
be rock
Think
or
you
brick?
finna have a good
This one looks
game,
like
boy.
it's got 90-degree.
Might as well bet that whole
Start
hand.
to look both
Float it over.
out of shape. Then you have a chunk here, definitely looking for red brick. That we see up here, but in a worse condition. This looking again melted,
Just
brown,
bet it.
and then this all still intact. And look at the detail built into the
It
brickwork.
don't matter what it is. Don't look at it. Bet it.
That was from 1929, that building. Or 1829, sorry. You got all these beverages here.
Sorry.
Public library again. Let's get to the public library. It tore this down in 1955. It's absolutely absurd. How do we look at this?
Max
Why did
out,
we tear
bro.
this down? It's a parking lot now. Look at this. Look at the spiral staircases.
No way.
Unbelievable. Here's the front entry. Right? Do these guys have any idea? These look like the villains in a movie with the trench coats and the hats. You know? I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. It's ridiculous. Look at this. How many levels of books do we have? We have this marble floor, perfectly laid in the 1800s, or down 1955. It certainly deserves its own video.
Man, they cap, man. Where all them books go? They couldn't sell out them books.
There you can see some staircase. You got the windows as well. Stained glass, I believe. Why wouldn't you have stained glass in a library? Anyway, that's the old public library torn down in 1955. Here's the asylum, Longview Asylum. We'll get to the end here. I want to get them all in here. It's going to be a little bit longer than usual. But I want you to see Cincinnati in all its glory. Or the remnants of its glory, anyway. There's the incline. This is an interesting feature, too, built into the incline cars. Seeing the actual car itself, built on a bit of an angle. Okay, here we are. Let's
What
get
the fuck
to
is that?
musical.
I ain't never seen
I
that.
want you to take this in. Take this in. Statue work. The splendor going on up here. Also, the scale of the building, because I don't think it's giving you a sense of that. Because let's move into. Okay, here we're looking at a shot from the 1888 Expo, World's Fair in Cincinnati. Yeah, they had one as well. What's going on? I never noticed that too. What's going on back there? Maybe that's the house on top of the hill.
Not a fuse, nigga.
Okay, that's a view from the back. Here we go. This is a little bit more modern. I'd say a 100-year-old photograph somewhere in there. What do we see that's different? Well, they've taken a lot, off the top here. You still have the little gates across the top here. A bunch of the statue work is removed. Here's a bit of the interior. Yeah, do we know who painted this? Or who did all this work here? Of course, they have a pipe organ. It's a music hall. You gotta have a pipe organ. Or a church. You gotta have a pipe organ. Another rendering of that. You get the sense again here. There we are. These even look a bit
That building was built for something more important than what the fuck music hall used
Horse
for.
drawn. Streetcars.
How the fuck is this nigga shirt?
Lobby.
What is y'all doing?
Alright. That's the music hall.
Let's go, bro. What y'all go through, bro? Get out of here, bro. Let's do it, bro.
That music hall really says something else. I like this one as well. It gives you sort of a sense of maybe the age of the city. Canals fully intact, bridges, streetcars crossing bridges.
That's what I'm talking about. Jack Cat.
And also,
Here, 10, just hand it over. I told y'all might as well just give me that shit. Give me that bread. Give me that bread.
this
Heard me?
might not be Cincinnati.
Ow! Hey! Damn!
This is the interior of the Pike Opera House. Rendering, of course. Alright, Plum Street Temple. Let's look at this one. Odd looking with these two almost having
Here.
Islamic look to it, almost. Of course, you do that windows.
Islamic.
Same features. Here's a bit of the inside. Again, I would suggest these are all original. Back to the brewery, so have a drink. Forget about that. Have a drink. Have a couple. Here's a whole keg. Why don't you do a keg stand? I do think the whole alcohol narrative is a part of the erasing, the scrubbing of our memory. I really do. Normalizing it in our society, even normalizing the abuse of alcohol, I suggest is a large part of the erasing of the memory. The inability to remember from day to day. I do remember that part of my life where I did a lot more consuming of alcohol. Here's in high school. There is sort of a day-to-day fog that comes with that.
There was another 70. What y'all tripping on?
That's not just me, Vincent. I've heard a lot of people talk about that, and it makes sense. It makes sense why it's so normalized in our society. Of course, you have to not remember just what we were capable of, or that there's a dissension going on. Another little snippet of the old fire.
Old
hospital. The details going on top here. Only a rendering. This is the lower side.
It ain't nothing but a little bit of. It ain't nothing but money.
Decorative top.
I ain't tripping.
Side here, looking definitely more like what we see in a lot of the modern style buildings that we're told are built in 1930, 1940 in that range. And I have suggested that we had our memory has been basically reset post World War II.
What you gonna do?
And I think it's very difficult to identify anything that went on pre-World War II. Collective amnesia. We got a bell rung.
World War II was
basically
stand tall, babies. Queen high. Stand tall, baby. 360. You fucking devil.
We have this historical timeline, even in the early 1900s.
Give me another queen. And the jack. 361.
We don't have a clear memory of the situation.
Oh, that boy started after the move.
All right. Coming to the University of Cincinnati. Finish with the brewery. No shortage of breweries in Cincinnati. So this is a look at Cincinnati. Pretty much everything I could dig up on it.
Right here working. Huh? Yeah, you lucky they can see your identity. Like here. And I watch that door. And nobody getting leaving this table yet. Hold up. Oh no, where he walking in? Y'all know him? Forget I got that file. Man, it's the strap. Nigga. With the cleanest gun. Not too fucking.
Does this feel like your period?
I got somebody on that. About it.
From the moment you first held your child in your arms, you likely felt a connection that transcended words, a recognition so deep it seemed to come from somewhere beyond this lifetime. This profound bond between parent and child is no accident, no random biological occurrence. It is, as ancient wisdom teaches us, a sacred contract between souls that spans across time and dimensions. Throughout history, spiritual traditions have acknowledged that the parent-child relationship represents one of the most significant karmic connections we experience in our human journey. These souls don't simply appear in our lives by chance. They come with purpose, carrying unfinished business, lessons to teach, or love to restore. One of the most fascinating perspectives of this parent-child bond comes from the renowned American clairvoyant Casey, who detailed how souls select their parents based on specific spiritual needs and karmic patterns that require healing or completion. According to these teachings, long before conception occurs,
Take me out, nigga.
an intricate planning
Sure,
process
yeah.
takes place on the spiritual plane. This perspective invites us to consider a profound truth.
Stand
Your
tall.
child may have been connected to your soul in previous lifetimes, perhaps as a parent, sibling, friend, or even an adversary. The roles reverse and transform across lifetimes, but the souls remain connected through an invisible thread of karma that pulls them back together to continue their shared spiritual journey. Think about it.
Beat
Have
that.
you ever looked into your
Give me
child's
that.
eyes
Eat
and
that.
felt a strange
Give me that.
familiarity?
Oh, I went from 1550 back in the
Have
game,
you ever
niggas.
wondered why certain patterns
I
of
just gave him
interaction
me money.
feel eerily familiar, as if you've danced this dance before?
I just gave him me
These
money.
moments of deja vu aren't merely psychological curiosities. They're glimpses into the timeless nature of your soul connection. Parents often report knowing their children on a level that defies logical
I
explanation,
bid for that. I
sensing
think
their
I ain't
needs
know what
before
I
they
had
express them,
going on this
feeling
game.
their pain from a
Y'all
distance,
scared to bet
or
money or something?
intuitively understanding aspects of
Y'all
their
ain't used to betting
personality
money or
that
something?
haven't yet fully manifested. This isn't just the result of
Y'all
biological
fellas?
bonding, it's the resonance of souls that have travelled together before. The invisible bond that connects you with your child was forged long before birth certificates and legal documents declared your relationship. It was established in the realm where souls make agreements, where karmic debts are acknowledged, and where opportunities for growth are recognized and embraced. When we view parenthood through this lens, it transforms from a biological function or social role into a
That
profound
guy's scared over there, bro. He's
Each
terrified
challenge
of that.
becomes meaningful, each conflict purposeful, and each moment of connection sacred. Your child isn't simply a younger human entrusted to your care. They are a soul with whom you've made a pact to grow together, to heal together, and perhaps to resolve what remained unfinished in previous shared lifetimes. The invisible bond between parent and child is the universe's most elegant system for soul connection.
Right.
It ensures that we don't
Right.
journey alone, that our karmic lessons come packaged in relationships
Right.
that matter deeply to us, motivating us to do the difficult work of
Yeah,
spiritual
man.
growth
How you
when we
doing,
might
fellas?
otherwise resist. When your
Right.
child displays a talent
Wow,
neither
you
parent
boys
possesses,
unbelievable.
demonstrates wisdom beyond their years, or shows an inexplicable fear with no apparent cause, you may be witnessing the evidence of past life connections manifesting in the present. The soul carries memories, talents, and unresolved issues across the threshold of
Fuck yeah.
birth, bringing with it the accumulated experiences
I
of
know it.
many lifetimes. Throughout human
I mean,
history, cultures across the globe have recognized this phenomenon. From Tibet's tradition of identifying reincarnated lamas to indigenous beliefs about ancestral spirits returning through newborns, the understanding that souls cycle back to continue their journey
Right
is
to that.
obsessive.
Okay.
This wisdom
Is
suggests
you
that
dumb?
your child may have been
Is you dumb like me?
in your previous existence,
How dumb are you?
now returning to continue
Bet
the
it.
soul contact
He's a
that
dummy.
transcends a single lifetime.
He's a dummy.
Consider the child who feels
Give me that.
inexplicably
Just giving me.
drawn to a certain
Wow.
culture, historical period, or
Wow.
location never experienced in this life, or the one who
Wow.
forms the immediate
Absolutely.
powerful
That's
bond
over there
with a
packing
grandparent they
about.
just met, as if reuniting with a
Should
beloved
have
friend.
was packing about.
These are not merely curiosities, but glimpses into the
It's
tapestry of
for
interconnected lives that your souls have shared. Research into
I
children's
know.
past life memories, conducted by psychiatrists
Don't leave, big money. Where you going?
Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia has documented thousands of cases
You done scared the nigga away.
details of previous incarnations, descriptions of homes they've never seen, knowledge of distant relatives, and even the circumstances of their former death. These memories typically fade as children integrate more fully into their current life, but they offer compelling evidence that the soul's journey extends far beyond a single lifetime. The parent-child relationship often reveals itself as a continuation rather than a beginning. You may find yourself instinctively understanding your child's needs or struggles in ways that surprise you. This intuitive knowing often stems from having known a soul before, perhaps in a different relationship. A mother who finds herself inexplicably patient with a child's particular quirk or the struggle of others may be responding to the echo of a previous connection. We choose our parents, went a saying from ancient spiritual traditions. This perspective
Gotta know when to hold them, gotta know when to fold them.
the circumstances of their birth, based on what they need to learn or resolve.
Gotta know when
Your
to hold them,
child
gotta
may
know
have
when to
chosen
fold
you
them, fellas.
specifically because your strengths, weaknesses, or life circumstances provide the perfect environment for their soul's growth. Similarly, something in your soul recognized and welcomed this particular child's energy, knowing on a deep level that you belong together in this lifetime. The karmic entanglements between parent and child can manifest as immediate, powerful love, or as challenging dynamics that push both to grow.
Cheap ass.
A child who constantly triggers your unresolved issues,
20 of that was
so
mine.
by divine design, offering you an opportunity to heal wounds you might otherwise have avoided
Yeah,
confronting.
real girly.
Likewise, parenting challenges may be precisely what your child's
So we got 2 more players.
from previous incarnations. This perspective invites us to approach parenthood with reverence and curiosity. When difficulties arise, we might ask, what is being healed here? What lesson are we both learning? What ancient agreement is being fulfilled through this challenge? Rather than seeing problems as random hardships, we can recognize them as purposeful encounters on the soul's journey. In the silent moments when you watch your sleeping child, you will sense this ancient connection, the feeling that you've known each other forever, that you're picking up a conversation that began long ago.
Less calories, more crushing it. Egg-like graphical wraps are protein-packed, flavor-stacked, and easy to stash in your family pack. Egg life is protein. Our future won't be handed to us. We will build it.
But how can we, when the education we need is still just intellectual? How?
Right.
Found truth. The souls now expressing themselves as parent and child have danced together before and will likely dance together again in different forms across the vast.
I had to tell them I saw that shit was going.
In year 2000, the death of a bright 17-year-old girl named Simone Bishop was officially ruled a suicide. The case was a simple, tragic, and heartbreakingly common story of teenage despair. With no signs of foul play, the police closed the file, leaving her mother, Eleanor, to drown in a silent, suffocating sea of grief. For months, the girl's bedroom remained a sealed, perfect sanctuary of memory. A room her mother could not bring herself to touch. But when Eleanor Bishop finally found the strength to confront her daughter's ghost, began the agonizing ritual of cleaning the room. She found something hidden behind a mirror. It was a small, secret video camera. The final tape it contained was not a suicide note, but a chilling, defiant recording that shattered the official narrative and proved her daughter's death was not a suicide, but a murder. The discovery transformed a grieving mother into a relentless detective and exposed a monster who had been hiding in plain sight. A killer whose perfect crime was undone by the one witness he never knew existed. Before I begin, thank you for watching. I'd love to know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. It means a lot to know you're here, sharing these stories with me. We're in this together. The police told one story. A mother's love found another. Now, let me tell you what really happened to Simone Bishop. The final report lay on the polished wood of Eleanor Bishop's dining room table, a thin, sterile manila folder that felt heavier than a tombstone. Detective Robert Perry sat opposite her, his large frame looking uncomfortable in the delicate antique chair. He was a man in his 50s, his face a kind, weary roadmap of his years on the force, and his eyes held a look of genuine, professional sympathy that did nothing to soften the brutal finality of his words. Standing just behind her, a hand resting on her shoulder in a gesture of silent, shared grief, was her husband, Robert. His face was a mask of stoic, hollowed-out sorrow. Mrs. Bishop, Detective Perry said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. The medical examiner's report is conclusive. The cause of death was acute toxicity from an overdose of her prescribed antidepressant medication. We found the empty bottle by her bed. The levels in her system were significant. He slid the report across the table. Eleanor stared at it. The clinical, black and white text, a blur through the thick, distorting lens of her tears. She had read it a dozen times already. Lividity, consistent with time of death. No signs of struggle. No defensive wounds. Door locked from the inside. Every sentence was a nail in the coffin of the daughter she had known. The scene was secure. Detective Perry continued softly, as if reciting a catechism of tragedy. There was no forced entry. We found the journal. Some of her recent entries indicated she was feeling a great deal of pressure. The stress of college applications, of her final year. Eleanor knew the journal meant. It was filled with her daughter's poetry, with her anxieties, with the normal, tumultuous, beautiful chaos of a 17-year-old girl's mind. A mind that the police had now interpreted as a suicide note, based on the totality of the evidence, Perry concluded. His official duty forcing him to speak the unspeakable. We are closing the case. The official ruling is death by suicide. The word hung in the silent, sun-drenched dining room. A word so monstrous, so fundamentally wrong, that it seemed to suck all the air from the space. Suicide. It was a story. A neat, tidy narrative that explained the unexplainable. It was a box that allowed the police department to close a file, to move on to the next tragedy. But it was a story that did not include her daughter. Not the Simone she knew. Simone, her vibrant, funny, fiercely intelligent daughter, her budding filmmaker, her artist, her poet. Yes, she was moody. Yes, she felt the world with a painful adolescent intensity. She had been seeing a therapist, had been prescribed medication for anxiety. But she was not a girl who would surrender. She was a fighter. She was a girl who was in the middle of a dozen projects, her mind a whirlwind of ideas and plans. She had just been accepted to NYU's film school, her dream, a dream she had worked for with a singular, passionate focus. The girl in Detective Perry's report was a stranger, a ghost of clinical depression who had taken her daughter's place. Robert's hand tightened on her shoulder, a gesture of shared, unbearable pain. Eleanor simply nodded at the detective, too numb, too hollowed out by the past month of grief to argue. She thanked him for his work. She walked him to the door. She closed it. And then she was alone with her husband in the quiet, perfect house. With the official, state-sanctioned lie resting on their dining room table. The investigation was over. The world had its story. And her own private and far more terrible investigation was just beginning. The weeks that followed were a season in hell. Eleanor and Robert Bishop, a couple who had built a life on a foundation of shared dreams and quiet intellectual partnership, were now two strangers adrift in the same silent sea of grief. The house, once a place of warmth and the happy, chaotic energy of a teenager's life, was now a silent, suffocating tomb. Eleanor, a woman who had built her life on the comforting order of lesson plans and the elegant logic of Shakespearean sonnets, now lived in a world without structure, without meaning. She was a high school English teacher on an indefinite leave of absence, a mother without a child, a wife whose husband seemed to be a million miles away. Grief was a physical presence, a heavy, invisible cloak that she could not take off. It slowed her movements, clouded her thoughts, and stole the taste from her food. She and Robert moved through the silent, empty rooms of their house like ghosts, their conversations a series of clipped, functional exchanges that never touched the vast, screaming emptiness between them. Eleanor attributed his distance to his own unique way of grieving. He was a man of quiet, stoic control, a successful businessman who had always compartmentalized his emotions. She saw his grief in the new, deep lines around his eyes, in the way he would stare into the middle distance for long, silent minutes, his jaw tight. She told herself they were two people on separate, parallel tracks of the same terrible journey, but a small, disloyal part of her mind, when she tried to silence, was unsettled by the nature of his sorrow. It felt hollow. It was a perfect, almost theatrical performance of a grieving father. He was stoic, he was supportive, but There was a strange, brittle quality to his sadness, a lack of the raw, messy, and unpredictable chaos of her own grief. She dismissed the feeling as a symptom of her own trauma, a projection of her own shattered state. The epicenter of their shared, silent grief was Simone's bedroom. It was on the second floor, at the end of the hall, and its door had remained closed since the day the police had unsealed it. It was a sanctuary, a time capsule, a crime scene. Neither of them could bring themselves to open it. To cross that threshold would be to admit a finality that they were not yet ready to face. It was the one place in the world where their daughter was still, in a way, alive. Her presence lingering in the scent of her perfume on a pillow, and the clothes still piled on a chair. In the posters of her favorite filmmakers, Spike Lee, Quentin Tarantino, Agnes Varda, still tacked to the walls, Eleanor's days were a form of suspended animation. She would wake late, the morning sun, cool, cheerful intrusion. She would wander the silent, empty rooms of her house, her hand trailing along the walls, as if trying to relearn the geography of a life that was no longer hers. She would sit for hours in the living room, staring at the photographs on the mantelpiece. Simone, as a gap-toothed 7-year-old. Simone, at her middle school graduation, her academic robes too big for her. Simone, on her 17th birthday, just a few months ago, her face luminous with a future that would never happen. Her mind was a torture chamber of unanswered questions. The police report, with its neat clinical certainty, was a constant, mocking presence. Suicide. The word was a poison. She would lie awake at night, her mind a frantic, desperate prosecutor, cross-examining the last weeks of her daughter's life. Had she missed a sign? A cry for help? Had their last argument, a stupid, trivial disagreement about a curfew, been the final straw? The guilt was a living, breathing creature, a parasite that fed on her grief. But beneath the guilt, beneath the sorrow, was a harder, colder, and more resilient emotion: doubt. It was the one thing that kept her from completely succumbing to the darkness. Her daughter, the girl she had raised, the girl whose every mood and nuance she had known, was not the girl in that report. The story did not fit. It was a story that had been imposed upon her. A convenient narrative that had erased the vibrant, complex, and ultimately unknowable truth of her child. She did not know what that truth was. She only knew, with the unshakable, primal certainty of a mother, that the official story was a lie, and she knew that if she was ever to find her way back to the world of the living, she would have to find the strength to confront the one place where the truth might still be hiding: her daughter's room. The day she finally decided to open the door was a gray, drizzly Tuesday in late November, 2 months after Simone's death. The decision was not a conscious one. She had simply woken up that morning with a sense of quiet, cold resolve. The waiting was over. It was time. Robert had already left for work, a silent gray ghost slipping out of the house before the sun was fully up. She was alone. She walked up the stairs, her heart a slow, heavy drum in her chest. She stood before the closed white door, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She took a deep, shuddering breath, a prayer for a strength she did not feel, and she turned the knob. The room was as the police had left it. The bed was unmade, the sheets a tangled landscape of her daughter's last, troubled sleep. A stack of books on film theory sat on the nightstand. A half-finished drawing was tacked to a corkboard on the wall. The air was still and thick with a faint, sweet scent of her daughter's perfume. It was a place of unbearable, normalcy. Eleanor stood in the doorway for a long time, a visitor in a life that was now a museum. Then, with a slow, deliberate purpose, she stepped inside. She had not come to mourn. She had come to search. She did not know what she was looking for. A letter, a hidden diary, a clue that the police, with their professional, naval eyes, might have missed. She was a mother, and she was on a final, desperate mission to find her daughter. She began with the clothes. the first and most painful of tasks. She opened the closet, a cascade of color and fabric, and began the slow, agonizing process of sorting, of folding, of deciding what to keep, what to give away. Each garment was a memory. The worn, soft flannel shirt Simone had loved to wear on rainy days. The black, elegant dress she had worn to the prom, a night of such hope and excitement. Eleanor worked with a kind of numb, methodical efficiency, her movements a shield against the wave of grief that threatened to pull her under. She spent the entire day in that room, a slow archaeological dig through the layers of a life cut short. She sifted through drawers of poetry, of half-finished screenplays, of ticket stubs for movies they had seen together. She found nothing, no note, no hidden secret, only the beautiful, messy, and tragically incomplete archive of a 17-year-old girl's life. As evening approached, she was down to the last, final task, cleaning the room itself. She armed herself with a bottle of polish and a soft cloth, the familiar domestic ritual, a small, comforting anchor in the storm of her emotions. She dusted the bookshelves. She wiped down the windowsills. And then she turned to the large, full-length mirror that was attached to the closet door. She sprayed the polish onto the glass and began to wipe it down in long, circular motions. As she did, she noticed that the mirror was slightly loose, that it rattled in its frame. It had always been that way, a minor, forgotten item on a long list of household repairs. She pressed on the corner to steady it, and it shifted, swinging slightly away from the door, and in the gap, she saw it, a small, dark, and unnatural shape. It was a shelf, a small, custom-built wooden shelf, cleverly hidden behind the mirror's frame. And on the shelf, pointed directly out through a tiny, almost invisible hole in the mirror's silver backing, was the lens of a small, compact Sony height camcorder. Eleanor stared at it, her heart stopping in her chest. A hidden camera. Her daughter, the budding filmmaker, had turned her own bedroom mirror into a secret two-way eye. A cold electric shock went through her, a feeling that was part terror, part a sudden, brilliant, and terrifying hope. The police had searched this room for a clue, but they had never thought to look behind the glass. Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached behind the mirror and carefully lifted the small, heavy camcorder from its hidden perch. It felt like a sacred object, a relic from a lost world. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions. Why had Simone set this up? What was she trying to record? Was this a part of some student film project? Or was it something else? Something more sinister? She found the camera's bag in the back of the closet. Inside were a dozen height tapes, all neatly labeled in Simone's familiar artistic script. Most were clearly school projects, documentary on urban decay, film noir lighting study. But one tape, the one that was still inside the camera, was labeled with only a single stark word: evidence. A cold dread, sharper and more terrifying than any grief she had yet felt, washed over her. This was not a school project. This was a record. This was a testament. She took the tape, her fingers fumbling with the small plastic cassette, and walked out of the silent, waiting bedroom. She went downstairs to the living room, to the television and the VCR, the tools of a life that had, in the space of a single, shocking discovery, been irrevocably changed. She was no longer just a grieving mother. She was now the sole keeper of her daughter's final, and most important, film. She slid the tape into the VCR. The machine word clicked, and then the screen, which had been a blank, blue void, flickered to life. The image was of Simone's room, seen from the strange, static, and slightly elevated perspective of the mirror. The quality was grainy, the colors muted, but the scene was clear, and it was not a suicide note. It was a confrontation. The recording began with Simone, sitting on her bed, her face a mask of tear-streaked anguish. The bedroom door opened, and her father, Robert Bishop, walked in. He moved with a heavy, weary tread, his face etched with a deep, troubled sadness. He sat on the bed beside his daughter. "We can't keep doing this," he said, his voice a low, pleading rumble. "You have to let this go. You have to. Let it go." Simone's voice was a raw, broken whisper, but it was laced with a steel that Eleanor had never heard before. "How can I let it go? I know what you did, Daddy. I saw the papers, the accounts. The money is gone. All of it. You stole it from your own company. You're going to lose everything. We're going to lose everything." Robert's face, which had been a mask of sorrow, hardened. The sadness was replaced by a flash of
My
cold,
bread back.
desperate anger. "You don't
All
understand,"
my
he
shit.
said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing hiss. "I did it for us. For this family.
Work it over.
To give you and your mother the life you deserved. This isn't a life. It's a lie," Simone cried, her voice rising. "You have to tell her. You have to go to the police. You have to make it right." "There is no making it right," Robert said, his voice flat and final. "There is only keeping it quiet, and then the final, chilling moment." Simone, in a gesture of desperate, pleading defiance, looked directly at the mirror, directly at the hidden lens. "I can't let you do this," she said, her voice now strong, clear, and filled with a terrible, heartbreaking courage. "I have the proof. I will not let you destroy this family." Robert's eyes followed her gaze. He looked at the mirror, and in his eyes, Eleanor saw a flicker of dawning, horrified recognition. He saw the tiny, dark pinprick of the lens. He understood what she had done. He lunged, his hand reaching out, not for his daughter, but for the mirror, for the camera, for the one silent witness to his secret. The image on the screen became a blur of motion, and then the tape cut to a violent, screaming wall of static. Eleanor sat in the darkness of her living room, the silence of the house, a crushing, deafening roar.
What do you
The tape
what do
was a
you
bombshell.
what money
It
is
was a
still?
motive. It was a confession. It was a testament to her daughter's incredible and ultimately fateful courage. The official story, the story of a sad, lonely girl who had taken her own life, was a lie. Her daughter had not been a victim of depression. She had been a warrior, a young filmmaker who had used her own secret camera to document the monster in her life. And that monster was her own father. The grief that had consumed Eleanor for months was burned away in an instant, replaced by a new and terrifyingly powerful emotion. Cold, clear, and absolute certainty. Eleanor Bishop was now a detective, and she was living in the same house as the prime suspect in her daughter's murder. The tape was her only lead, and she became its most obsessive, dedicated scholar.
He did what though? He stole what money?
Save more at Morris Home. This is our biggest holiday sale with 25% off all the latest trends. 25% off premium brands.
Want $1,000 weight loss medication for $50? What? It all starts with grocery.
But dozens of times, her living room transformed into a makeshift cold case unit, the glow of the television screen, a constant, ghostly presence in the silent house. The man she had shared a bed with for 25 years, the man she was now sharing a hollow, grief-stricken existence with, was a stranger, a monster. Her every interaction with him was now a performance, a terrifying act of concealment as she tried to maintain a facade of the grieving, broken wife, while her mind was a whirlwind of fear, rage, and cold, analytical calculation. She did not go to the police, not yet. She knew, with a deep, cynical certainty, that they would be skeptical. They would see a grieving mother clinging to a wild, unsubstantiated theory, accusing her own equally grieving husband. They would see an ambiguous recording of a heated family argument, a tragic but explainable suicide. She knew she needed more. She needed a piece of hard, irrefutable evidence, a fact that could not be dismissed as the fantasy of a parent in denial. She needed to find the one, small, overlooked detail that would corroborate the story the tape was telling. The detail that would prove not just a confrontation, but a murder. Her approach was that of a literary critic, a profession she had honed over 30 years. She began to deconstruct the recording, to analyze it not for its emotional content, but for its data. She created a timeline, a transcript, a list of every object, every word, every shadow. She was searching for the one, small detail that would break the case open. The detail that would transform her from a crazy, grieving woman into a credible, undeniable witness. She cross-referenced the tape with Simone's diaries, her school papers, her computer files. She was building a case, brick by brick, in the quiet solitude of her own home, a home that had become a prison. She learned that the papers Simone had mentioned were likely from a locked file cabinet in Robert's home office, a place Simone, a curious and intelligent girl, had likely managed to break into. The motive was clear. Simone had discovered her father's financial crimes and had confronted him, and he had killed her to silence her. But this was still not enough. It was a motive, but it was not proof of murder. The proof, she was certain, was on the tape itself. She just had to be smart enough to see it. The moment of discovery, when it came, was a quiet, almost anticlimactic click of a puzzle piece falling into place. She was watching the tape for what must have been the 50th time. She was focused on the final, chaotic frames, the blur of motion as Robert lunged towards the camera. She played the sequence in slow motion, frame by agonizing frame, and in the blur, for a fraction of a second, his left arm was in clear view. His shirt sleeve had written on his wrist, and on his wrist was his watch. It was his signature watch, a heavy gold Rolex, a gift she had given him for their 20th anniversary. It was unmistakable. Eleanor froze, the remote control slipping from her fingers. She felt a surge of pure, ice-cold adrenaline. She scrambled to her feet and ran to her study, to the locked drawer where she kept the one official document she had from the police. She pulled out the thick, final report on Simone's death. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the transcripts of the original interview. And she found it. Detective Perry's interview with Robert Bishop, conducted the day after Simone's body was found. Perry had asked Robert for his alibi, for his whereabouts on the afternoon of their daughter's death. And Robert's answer was right there, in cold black and white type. I was running errands all afternoon, the transcript read. I had to drop my watch off at the jeweler's for a repair. It's been there all week. You can check. Eleanor stared at the words. It's been there all week. The videotape was irrefutable, time-stamped proof that he had been wearing the watch during his confrontation with Simone. His alibi was not just a mistake. It was a deliberate, calculated, and now provable lie. She had it. She had the proof. She had the one, single, undeniable fact that would force the world to see the truth. She had a weapon that would, she now knew, finally bring her daughter's killer to justice. The meeting with Detective Robert Perry took place in the same sterile interview room where he had, months earlier, gently but firmly, closed the case on her daughter's life. This time, the dynamic was different. Eleanor Bishop was not there as a grieving mother. She was there as an investigator, and she had brought her evidence. Perry, to his credit, had agreed to the meeting, though his demeanor was one of weary professional indulgence. He saw a woman who was still trapped in the denial stage of grief, a woman who needed to be handled with a gentle, therapeutic touch. He was prepared to listen patiently, and then to gently, regretfully, tell her that it changed nothing. Mrs. Bishop, he began, his voice soft. I know this is difficult, but we have to trust the evidence. Dean's report was very clear. The ME's report was based on a false timeline, Detective, Eleanor said, her voice a calm, clear, and unwavering line. She opened her bag and placed a single, unlabeled height videotape on the metal table between them. My daughter was a filmmaker. She was working on a project. I believe you need to see her final film. Perry sighed, a deep, tired sound. He had seen this before. Grieving families, desperate for answers, would create elaborate, imagined narratives. But he was a decent man. He would watch the tape. He would listen. He took the tape and slid it into the VCR, TV combo unit that was bolted to a metal cart in the corner of the room. He hit it. The grainy image of Simone's bedroom appeared on the screen. Perry watched, his expression impassive, as the scene with Robert Bishop unfolded. He saw the heated, emotional argument. He saw a family in crisis. He saw a deeply troubled father and a distraught, defiant daughter. This is a tragedy, Mrs. Bishop, he said when the tape ended. And it's clear your family was under a great deal of stress. But it's not proof of murder. It's a family argument. You're right, Eleanor said. That's not the proof. The proof is in the final frames. She took the remote, rewound the tape to the last chaotic seconds, and played it in slow motion. She stood up and walked to the screen, her finger pointing to the blurry, but unmistakable, image of the gold watch on Robert's wrist. His watch, Detective. He's wearing his watch. Perry squinted at the screen. Okay, he said, his voice cautious. He's wearing his watch. So what? So, Eleanor said, her voice a quiet, deadly weapon. His official sworn statement to you, the alibi he gave you for the afternoon of our daughter's death, was that he was running errands, the most important of which was dropping this very watch off at the jeweler's for repair. He claimed the watch had been at the jeweler's home. This tape proves he was lying. A flicker of sudden confusion, irritation, a dawning, uncomfortable understanding crossed Perry's face. He remembered the alibi. It had been a minor, but solid detail. He looked back at the screen, then at Eleanor. He had simply been
Booking.com has all kinds of things because a city hotel is right for some, but not quite right for others. Find exactly what you're looking for. Booking.com, booking. Yeah.
Peacemaker to my son. I prioritize his business. I know this isn't a loss. Jeez, right? No one will break us apart.
It's Rowley's $4 unbeatable meal deal is getting blown up.
Yeah, I rocked the drive-thru back in the day. Yes, I still do.
Get yours for fries, drink, and dessert. Just $4.
Let's go.
Only at Checkers and Rowley's.
This is different.
Oh, I don't get football. Right? Why do they score by 7? And the kicker is so little. I worry about that. You didn't like my nachos? I love your nachos.
Cotton out leaves you so clean, you'll want to come clean about everything else.
Boy, bro.
He made a single quiet phone call to the high-end jewelers. Robert's alibi was not just broken, it was shattered. He had lied, deliberately and provably, about his whereabouts on the day his daughter had died. A stunned Perry realized that Eleanor's impossible, monstrous story was true. He was now investigating a homicide, a crime, and only suspect was the victim's own father. The case was no longer a cold file. It was alive and very active. Investigation into a man who had, until this moment, been the picture of a grieving, sympathetic victim. The POV shifts to Perry, a man who now sees the entire case in a new, sinister light. He sits in his cluttered office late at night, the videotape playing on a small monitor. Ghostly images of Simone and her father, a constant, looping reminder of his own failure. He is no longer looking at the case as a suicide. He is looking at it as a staged homicide. The new theory of the crime begins to form. A narrative built on the foundation of Eleanor's discovery. Simone Bishop, a smart, observant, and courageous girl, had discovered that her father, the successful businessman, was a criminal. She had found evidence of his massive, multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. She had, as the tape showed, confronted him. She had not been threatening him. She had been pleading with him, begging him to confess, to make it right, to save their family from the ruin that was coming. And Robert Bishop, a man whose entire identity was built on the facade of success and control, had been backed into a corner. Faced with the loss of his company, his wealth, his reputation, and the prospect of a long prison sentence, he had panicked. And in that moment of panicked, narcissistic rage, he had killed his own daughter to silence her. The method was as cowardly as it was clever. He had known about her struggles with anxiety, about her prescription medication. He had used her own vulnerability as his weapon. Perry's theory was that he had forced her to ingest a massive, lethal overdose of her own antidepressants. He had then carefully staged the scene to look like a suicide. He had placed the empty bottle by her bed. He had likely even forged the final despairing entries in her journal. A cruel, final act of character assassination. He had locked the door from the inside, knowing how to bypass the simple lock to relock it from the outside. He had created a perfect, seamless crime scene, a narrative that the police would be predisposed to believe. He had then gone to the jeweler, picked up his watch, and created a false, but easily verifiable alibi the following day, knowing that the time of death would be a crucial, and in his mind, controllable, element of the investigation. His one critical mistake was the camera. In his panicked, arrogant belief that he had committed the perfect crime, he had not known that his daughter, the filmmaker, had been recording their final, fatal conversation. He had not known that his own signature gold watch would become the star witness against him. Perry now had a theory, a motive, and a broken alibi. He was on the verge of an arrest, but he knew that a defense attorney would tear the case apart, painting Eleanor as an unstable, grieving mother, and the tape as an ambiguous family argument. He needed one, final, irrefutable piece of evidence. He needed to prove the motive. He needed to find the financial crime that had led to the murder. The second surge of the investigation was not a search of a house, but of life. Armed with the evidence from the videotape and the broken alibi from the jeweler's records, Detective Perry was able to convince a judge to grant a sealed, comprehensive warrant for the financial records of Robert Bishop and his company. It was an unprecedented move, a deep, intrusive dive into the life of a man who was, to the public, still a grieving father. The task of sifting through a decade of complex financial data was handed over to the police department's forensic accounting unit. The lead accountant, a quiet, methodical woman who was a legend in the department for her ability to make numbers confess, began her work. The investigation into Robert Bishop's finances was a slow, painstaking excavation of a secret life. On the surface, his company was a model of success, a thriving construction firm with a portfolio of impressive projects. His personal finances were equally pristine, the picture of a wealthy, responsible family man. But the forensic accountant was not interested in the surface. She began to dig deeper into the complex web of subcontractors, suppliers, and shell corporations that are the lifeblood of any large construction business. And there, she found the rub. It was a classic and brilliantly executed embezzlement scheme. Robert had been systematically defrauding his own company for years. He had created a series of phantom subcontractors, shell corporations that existed only on paper. He would then generate fraudulent invoices from these ghost companies for materials that were never delivered, for labor that was never performed. He would approve the payments himself, funneling millions of dollars from his own company into a series of hidden offshore bank accounts. The fraud was massive, sophisticated, and had been going on for nearly a decade. But the accountant's report revealed something more pressing, a fact that provided the direct, immediate trigger for the murder. In the weeks leading up to Simone's death, Robert's company had been subjected to a routine but mandatory external audit by the IRS. The auditors were closing in. They had flagged a series of suspicious transactions and had scheduled a final in-person meeting to review the original invoices. That meeting was scheduled for the day after Simone was killed. The truth was now brutally, chillingly clear. Simone had not been the only one who had discovered his crimes. The IRS was on his trail. He was on the verge of being exposed, of losing everything. His daughter's confrontation had not been the beginning of his crisis. It had been the final, personal, and unbearable complication in a world that was already collapsing around him. He had not just been trying to silence his daughter. He had been trying to buy himself time, to find a way to hide the evidence from the federal investigators who were about to walk through his door. The financial audit was the final, irrefutable piece of the puzzle. It was the motive, written in the cold, hard language of a ledger. It transformed the case from a compelling but circumstantial one into an ironclad prosecution. The numbers, which Robert Bishop had so skillfully manipulated to build his secret fraudulent empire, were now the very things that would bring it all crashing down. The final confrontation took place in the same sterile interview room where the investigation had been reborn. Robert Bishop sat across from Detective Perry, his face a mask of calm, weary indignation. He had come to the station voluntarily at Perry's request, still playing the part of the cooperative, grieving father. He began hard. He played the videotape, forcing Robert to watch the final, terrible confrontation with his own daughter, to hear her desperate, pleading voice one last time. Robert watched, his face impassive, a single crocodile tear tracing a path down his cheek. It was a terrible argument, he whispered, his voice thick with a feigned emotion. I was trying to help her. She was so confused. Perry stopped the tape. He then laid the first piece of hard evidence on the table. It was the jeweler's repair receipt. Its damning time. Your alibi was a lie.
Yes, indeed.
Perry said, his voice low, even monotone. He then laid down the second document. It was a single summary page from the forensic accountant's report. A flowchart that showed the movement of millions of dollars into a hidden offshore account. And finally, he laid down the third piece of paper.
I think our
It was a
deal
copy of
renewal's
an email
been
from the
digging
IRS,
in the building.
confirming their scheduled audit
It's
for the
happened
day
before,
after Simone had died. She knew, Perry said quietly. And the IRS was about to know. You ran out of time, and you ran out of choices. Robert Bishop stared at the three pieces of paper. A perfect, logical, and irrefutable
Latest shipments is
of
long
the
overdue.
calm,
The
confident
investors are
facade he had
starting to
maintained for
worry.
months, for years, finally, and completely disintegrated. The successful businessman, the grieving father, the meticulous relentless killer, vanished, leaving behind only a small, pathetic, defeated man. His thumb in his chair, feeling alone, terrifying, and confused.
I see.
He told them everything. They argued. A flash of rage, a desperate, panicked act of forcing the pills down his own daughter's throat. The cold, methodical staging of the scene. The construction of the alibi. The story ends with Helen Bishop, a few weeks later, in a quiet, empty house. The trial is over. Robert has been sentenced to life in prison. She is holding the Heite tape in her hand, the tape labeled Evidence. She has watched it one last time. She is no longer filled with just grief or with rage. She is filled with a fierce, profound, and heartbreaking pride. Her daughter, the brilliant, brave 17-year-old filmmaker, had seen the truth, and in her final and most important act, she had found a way to make sure the world saw it too.
Domino's Best Deal Ever is back. Get any hand-tossed pan, thin crust, or New York-style pizza with any toppings for just $9.99 online. Your favorite pizza at our best price. It's Domino's Best Deal Ever.
You hear they caught one of the laborers stealing wine from the church? Happened before, I believe.
Abandoned a cornerstone of the conservancy doctrine. Abandoned a cornerstone of the conservancy doctrine.
As he said, if you realize that there are
I've seen vagrants making their beds in the streets at night. Unbelievable! What is this world we're living in?
On July 11th of 1991, a bunch of UFOs lit up the skies above Mexico City during a total solar eclipse. Thousands of people reported seeing a large metallic disc in the sky. Not only that, but footage of the object was captured and even broadcasted on the news. It was the first widely reported UFO sighting in Mexico City, which since that day has become a hotbed for UFO and unexplainable extraterrestrial activity. So what does this have to do with the Mayan calendar? Well, the calendar told the July 11th eclipse, calling it the sixth sign of Quetzalcoatl, and claiming that it would bring about change and cosmic awareness, which I honestly think it's safe to say it did. Whether or not the calendar accurately predicting the events of July 11th is just some strange coincidence, or if the Mayans really did mean to calculate aliens' first major coming to Earth, for now remains a mystery, but I hope not for long, because personally, I am super eager to know more.
Alright, this next one is almost too incredible to be a mere coincidence. I'd love to see someone try and break this down and have it make any logical sense. This is the story of two twin brothers separated at birth who grew up and reunited as adults, only to find that they basically led identical lives. They were born in 1940 and adopted into different families in Ohio. The twins had no contact with each other for nearly 4 decades, but when they finally reunited, the similarities in their lives were just too uncanny. Both were named James by their adoptive parents, which, you know, are a common but incredibly awesome name, and everyone named James is a winner, but, you know, not all that crazy. There's more, though. Growing up about 40 miles apart, they both went by the nickname Jim, and each brother would go on to marry a woman named Linda. After divorcing their first wives, both Jims found love again with women named Betty. both also had sons, who they each named James and Alan. They also both had dogs. And what were their dogs' names? Well, one was named Toy, and the other was named Toy. I get it if you named your dog Skipper or something like that, typical dog name, but Toy? That's odd. Both brothers also enjoyed woodworking and had a penchant for mechanical drawing. Even their choice of vacation spots matched up. Both Jims would often go to the same Florida beach. Their health habits were similar. Both had a history of headaches, smoked the same brand of cigarettes, and even gained and lost weight around the same periods in their lives. When Jim Lewis and Jim Springer finally met in 1979 at the age of 39, it was like they were looking at a slightly alternate reality version of themselves. The case of these twins is a pretty fascinating study on how much of our behavior and preferences might be hardwired into our DNA.
Next, we have the strange life of Violet Jessup, who, during her time working as an ocean liner stewardess, was present for 3 separate ocean disasters, all on Olympic-class ocean liners, including one of the most famous disasters, the sinking of the RMS Titanic. On June 14th of 1991, Jessup was aboard the RMS Olympic when it crashed with the ocean cruiser HMA Hope. The Olympic, which was at the time of the incident the largest civilian liner in the world, suffered heavy damage and flooded in the crash, but luckily it was able to make it back to Southampton and no one was killed or even seriously injured. On April 10th of 1912, Jessup was working as a stewardess on the RMS Titanic when it hit an iceberg and sank just 4 days into its maiden voyage. Luckily, she was able to board one of the ship's lifeboats and she made it safely to shore. 4 years later, on November 21st of 1916, Jessup was working aboard the HMHS Britannic when the ship hit a mine and sank in the Aegean Sea. It was the largest ship to be lost during the First World War. As the ship sank, Jessup attempted to jump to safety, but instead hit her head on the ship's keel. She did, however, resurface, was rescued, and survived. This girl's got 9 lives, or at least 3.
Speaking of the Titanic, though, let's talk about a little novella called Futility. After the sinking of the Titanic, folks were quick to point out the eerie similarities between the circumstances surrounding the real-life disaster and a fictional novella written by American author Morgan Robertson, which was written in 1898, 14 years before the sinking of the unsinkable ship. So what were the similarities? Well, the story describes a big British passenger liner called the Titan that is deemed unsinkable, but strikes an iceberg and sinks. Not only that, but the ship in the story doesn't have enough lifeboats, and it sinks in April in the North Atlantic Ocean. All the circumstances I listed there, other than the difference in the name of the ship, is identical to what happened in real life in 1912.
That's feeling built up. Next up on our list today, we have the coincidental closeness of the rare Chelyabinsk meteor and the 2012 DA-14 asteroid, 2 incredibly rare events that occurred 16 hours apart on the exact same day, but seemingly had nothing to do with one another. On February 15th, 2013, an asteroid entered into Earth's atmosphere over the southern region of Russia and exploded, with a force equal to 20 to 30 of the atomic bombs used at Hiroshima. 1,500 people were wounded, and 7,000 buildings experienced varying degrees of damage as a result. After the explosion, the ground below was hot, and the entire affected area smelled like smoke. As I said, something like this is extremely rare, and the event was also the only time in history that a meteor has been known to cause human injury. Not only that, but the meteor was not detected by authorities prior to it entering into the atmosphere. If that's not crazy enough, just 16 hours later, another asteroid named 2012 DA-14 came within 27,700 meters, 17,200 miles, of the surface of Earth, making it the closest asteroid of its size to have ever been recorded in modern times.
I'm going to call this next story the real-life Final Destination, because it sounds like a death you'd see in Final Destination. That's a movie you've seen, right? Anyway, this guy just could not escape the fate that was waiting for him. Henry Zieglin was born in 1861 in Honey Grove, Texas. He was a farmer who began dating a woman named Charla Harris. They lived together for a time, but in 1883, Henry dumped her. This left Charla utterly devastated, and and in her despair, she ended up taking her own life. Charlotte's brother was filled with rage and blamed Henry for her death, and he decided he was going to take his revenge. So one day he snuck into Henry's barn while he was tending to the horses and fired at him. The bullet grazed Henry, who then pretended to be dead. Believing he had killed Henry, the brother then turned the firearm on himself. Little did Henry know, but the bullet had lodged into a tree by the barn. Now, 20 years went by. Henry decided to cut down a tree in front of his barn. It was too thick to cut with an axe, so he opted for dynamite. When the dynamite went off, Henry was killed instantly. Not from the explosion, he was a fair distance away, but from the bullet that had been lodged into the tree 2 decades earlier.
Next up, we have the strange life of Robert Todd Lincoln, or should I say strange saving. As we all should know, the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth in a theater on April 14th of 1865. What you might not know is that during his presidency, Lincoln actually bore witness to 2 other assassinations of very prominent members of American society. The first was the assassination of Elmer Ellsworth, a Union Army colonel who was killed by a hotel owner in Virginia in May of 1868. And the second was a Union Army general named James B. McPherson, who was killed during the Battle of Atlanta in July of 1864. What's cool about this is that it's not actually the weird part. What's weird is that prior to the death of Abraham Lincoln at the hands of John Wilkes Booth, Abraham Lincoln's son, Robert Todd Lincoln, was actually saved by John Wilkes Booth's brother, Edwin Booth. Edwin, who was a famous actor at the time, had seen Robert Todd fall between the platform and a train at a train station and quickly pulled him to safety before things got gory. At the time, Edwin had no idea who Robert Todd was, and Robert Todd later recounted the incident, saying, "I was indebted to him for the rest of my life." Pretty strange stuff.
Speaking of Abraham Lincoln, he shares some pretty uncanny similarities with John F. Kennedy. People have listed tons of coincidences between the two. Too many to list here, but some of the most famous include Lincoln and Kennedy both being elected to Congress in a year ending in 46. Then both were elected president in a year ending in 60. They both had security agents named William, who died at the age of 75. The eeriest similarities surround their deaths, though. Both presidents died after being fired at in the head on a Friday, and both were sitting next to their wives at the time. Lincoln died at Ford's Theater, and Kennedy died in a Lincoln car, which was made by the Ford Motor Company. Both had been accompanied by another couple, the male in each couple being wounded in the attack as well. And both of their successors were named Johnson. Lincoln was succeeded by Andrew Johnson, and Kennedy was succeeded by Lyndon B. Johnson. Lastly, the names Lincoln and Kennedy each have 7 letters. That's not a big one.
The spring of 1987 was unusually warm in Millbrook, Ohio,
A small farm nestled between rolling hills and endless cornfields. Main Street stretched for barely 6 blocks, lined with family-owned businesses that had weathered decades of economic ups and downs. The Millbrook High School prom was the social event of the year, and 19-year-old Jessica Lynn Caldwell had been looking forward to it for months. Jessica was the kind of girl who lit up a room without trying. Her auburn hair caught the light just right, and her laugh could be heard from across the school cafeteria. She worked part-time at Henderson's Five and Dime after school, saving every penny for college in the fall. Her parents, Robert and Linda Caldwell, owned a modest farm on the outskirts of town where they raised cattle and grew soybeans. If you're finding this story as compelling as we are, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers from all over the world who share our fascination with these mysterious cases. The dress Jessica chose for prom was nothing short of spectacular. She'd driven 40 miles to the nearest department store in Columbus, spending weeks of saved wages on a midnight blue gown with delicate beading that sparkled like stars against the dark fabric. The dress hugged her figure perfectly, and when she tried it on for her mother, Linda had tears in her eyes. "You look like a princess, sweetheart," Linda had whispered, adjusting the thin straps on Jessica's shoulders. Jessica's date was Tommy Brennan, the quarterback of the football team and her boyfriend of 8 months. Tommy was everything a small-town girl could want: handsome, popular, and destined for a football scholarship at Ohio State. They'd been inseparable since homecoming, and everyone in Millbrook assumed they'd get married after college. The night of May 16, 1987, arrived with perfect weather. The temperature hovered around 70 degrees, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming apple trees through the town. The prom was held at the Millbrook Community Center, decorated with silver streamers and white balloons. Jessica and Tommy arrived fashionably late, making an entrance that had everyone turning to look. "You two are going to be prom king and queen for sure," Jessica's best friend, Amy Patterson, had whispered excitedly as they posed for photos. The evening unfolded like a fairy tale. Jessica and Tommy danced to every slow song, laughed with their friends, and shared cake during the crowning ceremony. Though they didn't win the titles, neither seemed to care. Around 10 o'clock, Tommy suggested they leave early to attend the after-party at Jake Morrison's farm, where his parents had given permission for the graduates to celebrate. Jessica hesitated. She'd been feeling slightly unwell all evening, complaining of a headache that wouldn't go away. The community center was snuffy, packed with nearly 200 students, and the combination of perfume, cologne, and the warm spring air was making her dizzy. As they swayed to the final dance of the evening. They stepped outside into the parking lot behind the community center. The area was dimly lit by a single street lamp, casting long shadows between the cars. Other couples had the same idea, scattered around the lot, talking and laughing. Jessica leaned against Tommy's car, a red 1984 Camaro that was his pride and joy. "Are you feeling better?" Tommy asked, his arm around her waist. Jessica nodded, but she still looked pale. "Maybe we should skip the after-party. I think I just want to go home." Tommy frowned. He'd been looking forward to the party all week, and several of his teammates were expecting him to be there. "Come on, Jess, it's prom night. We can't miss Jake's party. I really don't feel well, Tommy. My head is pounding." They argued quietly for several minutes, their voices barely audible over the music drifting from inside the building. Other students later reported seeing them by the car, but no one paid much attention to what seemed like a typical couple's disagreement. Finally, Jessica made a decision that would haunt everyone who knew her. "You go to the party," she said, pulling away from Tommy's embrace. "I'll find another way home." "Don't be ridiculous, Jess. I'm not leaving you here. Amy can give me a ride, or I'll call my dad." She was already walking away from him,
her heels clicking on the asphalt. Tommy called after her, but Jessica disappeared around the corner of the building, heading back toward the main entrance. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. When Amy Patterson couldn't find Jessica inside the community center, she assumed her friend had reconciled with Tommy and left for the after party. Tommy, arriving at Jake's farm alone 20 minutes later, told everyone that Jessica had gone home sick. Neither realized the other didn't know where she was until the next morning. Linda Caldwell woke up at dawn on May 17th, expecting to find her daughter asleep in her bedroom, still wearing her prom dress like she had after homecoming. Instead, she found an empty bed and an unlocked front door. Jessica's car was still in the driveway, her purse and keys sitting on the kitchen counter, where she always left them. The Caldwell family's world collapsed in a matter of hours. By noon, half the town was organized into search parties, combing through the cornfields and wooded areas around Millville. The Ohio State Highway Patrol was called in, followed by investigators from the county sheriff's department. Detective Ray Hutchinson, a 20-year veteran who'd seen his share of missing persons cases, arrived that afternoon to interview the family and Jessica's friends. He was a tall, weathered man with kind eyes who specialized in cases involving young people. In my experience, Detective Hutchinson told Robert and Linda as they sat in their living room, surrounded by family photos that now felt like evidence. When a young person goes missing after a social event like prom, there are usually three possibilities. They ran away, met with an accident, or someone took them. Linda gripped her husband's hand. She had college starting in the fall. She was excited about the future. She wouldn't have left without her car in the house. His voice hoarse, always important through the search fields of the morning. Detective Hutchinson nodded grimly. He'd already ruled out the runaway theory himself, but he had to explore every angle. The investigation would woke up on the timeline between 10:30 p.m. Jessica was last seen entering the parking lot. At 6 a.m. the next morning, with her absence discovered. Security at the community center was open. It was two parent volunteers who were more focused on preventing underage drinking than very wet. Tommy Brown became the first and most obvious suspect. Young men were statistically the most likely perpetrators of cases involving missing girls. And therefore, he witnessed by several people. Detective Hutchinson spent hours interviewing someone whose story was not consistent. Jessica had walked away from him, presumably to go back inside the building, and he'd left for the party, assuming she'd find her own way home. I should have gone after her, Thomas echoed one of many interviews, tears streaming down his 18-year-old face. I should have made sure she got home safe. I'll never forgive myself. But Tommy's alibi was solid. He'd arrived at Jake's party by 11 p.m., where dozens of classmates saw him through the door. He'd even been photographed getting beer on the report. His face clearly visible in several pictures with the gradually developed internally. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation expanded beyond board books. Jessica's photographs appeared at milk cartons and missing person posters throughout her house. The FBI was consulted, bringing in specialists from kidnapping and human trafficking cases. The community rallied around the Caldwell family in ways only small towns could. Neighbors brought casseroles and offered to help with farming. Businesses donated money for reward funds and sweat efforts. The high school delayed graduation by a week, hoping Jessica would be found in time to walk across the stage with her classmates. Spring turned to summer and summer faded into fall. Hope began to twinkle. Jessica's empty chair at the Millbrook High graduation ceremony brought tears to hundreds of eyes. Her acceptance letter at Ohio University went unanswered, and a midnight blue prom dress that had made her look like a princess became a still of green, interrupted with a laugh of sugar. Linda Caldwell refused to change Jessica's bedroom. keeping it exactly as her daughter had left it on the morning of May 16th. Her prom corsage, now dried and brown, remained pinned to her dresser mirror. College brochures still sat in neat stacks on her desk, filled with hopes and plans that would never come to fruition. Detective Hutchinson worked the case obsessively for months, following every lead and interviewing hundreds of people. The examined possibility Jessica had encountered a stranger, perhaps someone passing through town who'd seen her at the prom and followed her outside. The community center's location, just off State Route 23, made it accessible to travelers who might not be familiar with the area. Highway 23 was a well-traveled route connecting Columbus to smaller communities throughout central Oklahoma. Truckers, traveling salesmen, and other transient individuals waited. Gas station attendees. Despite the extensive investigation, concrete evidence in the case officially remained open, but active investigation scaled Detective Hutchinson retired in 1995, taking stock of Jessica's case files with him and promising the Caldwell family that he'd never stop looking for answers. In the months following their disappearance, Robert's hair went completely grey as his legend and then lost the filter. Her face taking on a haunted look that never quite recognized. They pulled the child to years, trying to correctly report its psychic secrets that claimed to have information about Jessica's father. The town would gradually begin a small community which was left behind. Parents became more protective of their children. High school events were more heavily supervised. The innocence of small-town life had been shattered. The terrible things that happened to everyone. Baby Patterson, Jessica's best friend, was struggling to feel she insisted on staying with Jessica instead of assuming she'd reconciled with Tommy. Amy eventually moved on able to go to so far. Tommy Brennan's life was forever changed. Despite being clearly confident in Jessica's disappearance, rumors of whispers of pigeons into high school. His football scholarship was withdrawn after college computers became uncomfortable with the negative consequences of the treatment. Secondly, where his past the 1990s brought new technologies to law enforcement. DNA testing, computer databases, improved communication between agencies. Cold case units were established in major departments, and Jessica's file is periodically reviewed by fresh investigators who brought new perspectives to old evidence. In 2002, 15 years after Jessica's disappearance, Detective Maria Santos of the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation handled the case as part of the cold case. Santos was known for a meticulous approach and the ability to find connections as investigators. Digitized all of Jessica's case files began cross-referencing them with similar disappearances throughout the Midwest. She discovered several cases in the late 1980s involving young women who vanished and found none identical to Jessica's case. The patterns of trouble. Serial predators often target victims of opportunity, Santos explained to Robert and Linda during a meeting with their fathers in 2003. Young women alone, in vulnerable situations, near major transportation routes. Your daughter's case fits a profile we're seeing across multiple jurisdictions. The Caldwells, now in their 60s and bearing the weathered look of people who'd endured decades of uncertainty, listened carefully as Santos outlined her theory. She believed Jessica might have been taken by someone who was passing through the area, possibly someone who made the highway corridor a regular part of their routine. Santos expanded her investigation to include truck stops, motels, and other businesses along Route 23. Locally, who might remember unusual customers from 1987. She examined old gas station security footage and motel registration records, looking for any detail that might have been overlooked. The investigation took on new urgency in 2005, when DNA evidence linked several of the similar disappearances Santos had identified. A pattern was emerging of a predator who'd operated throughout Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky during the late 1980s and early 1990s, targeting young women in small towns before vanishing without a trace. But despite these developments, Jessica's case remained frustratingly elusive. Unlike some of the other cases, no physical evidence had been recovered that could be tested for DNA. No witnesses had been found with description of suspicious individuals. Jessica had simply walked around the corner of the local community centre and disappeared into the night. Colwell developed cancer in 2008, a diagnosis that seemed to accelerate the family's urgency to find answers about their daughter. As Linda underwent chemotherapy treatments, she made Santos promise to never give up on Jessica's case. "You need to know what happened the day you were dead," Linda whispered during one of the last meetings. "You need to know where she lives." Linda passed away in early 2009, taking with her 22 years of unanswered questions and unresolved grief. Robert was left alone in the farm, surrounded by memories of his wife and daughter. Jessica's bedroom remained unclaimed, the shrine of her life interrupted and dreams deferred. The case might have remained permanently cold if not for a bizarre discovery in the summer of 2023, 36 years after Jessica's disappearance. Timothy Walsh, a construction worker demolishing an old home outside Lancaster, Ohio, 50 miles southeast of Millbrook, made a discovery that would shock investigators and reopen wounds that had never fully healed. Hidden beneath loose floorboards in the barn's cables, Walsh found a carefully wrapped package containing a midnight blue prom dress, size 6, with delicate beading that still caught the light despite decades of darkness. Along with the dress were a pair of silver high-heel shoes, size 7, and a small evening purse containing a Millbrook High School student ID card bearing the name Jessica Lynn Colwell. The barn had belonged to the Hendersons, who used it for haystack until the early 1990s, when they switched to more modern farming techniques. The property had been sold several times over the years, eventually ending up in the hands of a development company that planned to build a shopping centre. Detective Santos, now a supervisor of the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, received the call about the discovery on Tuesday morning that would forever change her understanding of Jessica's case. She drove to Lancaster immediately, her mind racing with possibilities and implications. The text was remarkably complex, protected by plastic wrapping and with dry conditions in the bottom. It was definitely Jessica's. Linda Colwell's detailed descriptions matched perfectly, down to the specific pattern of beading around the neckline, a small repair where Jessica had caught the hem of her bedroom door while getting ready. But the dress told a story that no one had expected. It wasn't torn, damaged. There were no obvious signs of violence or struggle. It had been carefully cleaned before being wrapped up, suggesting that whoever had taken it had done so deliberately, perhaps as a trophy or memento. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. How had Jessica's dress ended up in a barn 50 miles from where she disappeared? Who had taken it, and why had they preserved it so carefully? Most importantly, where was Jessica herself? the barn's ownership history became crucial to the investigation. Santos traced the property back through decades of sales and transfers, looking for any connection to Millbrook or to people who might have been in the area at the night of Jessica's disappearance. But next winter, when Santos discovered that the barn had belonged to Carl Henderson in 1987, the same Henderson family that owned the 5 and blind Jessica's Jessica's box, though he died in 1999, 4 years after Jessica's disappearance. Carl Henderson had been a long-haul trucker, who used the barn to store equipment and supplies for his small trucking operation. This route had regularly taken him through Millbrook on State Route 23, and he'd been known to stop at local businesses during his runs. Santos immediately focused her investigation on Carl Henderson, pulling together everything she could find about his life, his business, and his movements in 1987. She discovered that Henderson had been in the Millbrook area on May 16, 1987. Gas station receipts showed he'd filled up his truck at Murphy's Gas on Main Street at 9:45 p.m., just 45 minutes before Jessica was last seen. The timing was significant. Henderson would have been finishing his fuel stop right around the time the prom was ending and students were beginning to leave the community. From the area's layout, including the back parking lot where Jessica was last seen, Santos located Henderson's surviving family members, including his son David, who worked with his father in the trucking business. David Henderson, now in his 70s and suffering from early-stage dementia, initially claimed no memory. During the second interview, with Santos gently probing his memories of his father's work routines, David made a comment that stuck with his memory. Dad always said he never worked like this. David mentioned his comment about him. He said people would think the worst, but he never hurt him. Santos felt her heart rate slowly. What girl, David? Which girl are you talking about? David looked confused for a moment, then shook his head. I don't know. Something about the dress. It took several more interviews, conducted with the assistance of a specialist in interviewing individuals with memory. It pieced together David Henderson's fragmented recollections. The swirling of the words was both tragic and infuriating in its senselessness. According to David's recollections of conversations with his father in the years before his death, Jessica had indeed encountered Carl Henderson on the night she disappeared. She'd been walking along State Route 23, apparently trying to get home after her argument with Tommy, when Henderson had stopped his truck to offer her a ride. Jessica had initially declined, but Henderson had been persuasive. He'd known her from his occasional stops at the 5 Brian, and he'd convinced her that he was a safe option for getting home. The rest was pleasant, but it was a long walk from the community centre to the Caldwell farm, especially in Prom Hill. What happened next was a tragedy born of impulse and opportunity rather than premeditation. According to David's fragmented memories of his father's confession, Carl Henderson had driven Jessica toward her family's farm, but had become increasingly agitated by her personal history. He'd been driven earlier than David would have, because it was unusual for a father to drink after work. The exact details of Jessica's death remained unclear in David's recollections, but it appeared to have been the result of a sudden violent outburst rather than a planned attack. Carl Henderson had strangled Jessica in his truck, possibly during an argument or attempted assault, then had panicked. Henderson had hidden Jessica's body in a location that David either couldn't remember or had never known, but he'd taken the dress and other belongings, apparently as some twisted form of trophy or memento, and had hidden them in his barn in Lancaster. Dad was never the same after that night, David told Santos during their final interview. He'd get quiet sometimes, real quiet, and he'd say things about how one mistake had done. I never understood what he meant until now. You see, Carl Henderson had continued his trucking routes for several more years, carrying the secret of Jessica's death with him until his own death from a car in 1991. He'd apparently considered confessing on multiple occasions. David remembered his starting to write records that he'd never finished and making comments about setting things right that had made no sense at the time. The discovery of Jessica's dress and David Henderson's testimony provided the answers that the Caldwell family had sought for 36 years. But those answers came with their own particular cruelty. Jessica had died within hours of her disappearance, killed by someone she trusted enough to accept her life. Her death had been senseless, the result of a moment's decision. A man who then spent the rest of his life trying to live with the control. Detective Santos faced the heartbreaking task of informing Robert Caldwell, now 81 and the sole surviving member of Jessica's immediate family, about the developments in his daughter's case. He told to the Caldwell father on September 9, 2023, carrying with her the evidence files containing Jessica's dress, as well as the full report of the investigation's conclusions. Robert listened to Santos' explanation with the quiet dignity he'd maintained throughout the decades of searching. When she finished, he sat in silence for several minutes, looking out the kitchen window toward the fields where he'd spent so many mornings calling his daughter's name. "Where is she?" he finally asked, his voice very like a whisper. "Where's Jessica's property?" Santos had to tell him that she'd already completed, but Carl Henderson had taken that secret from his grave. Despite extensive searches of properties associated with Henderson, including the Lancaster Bar, where the dress was found, no trace of Jessica's remains had been discovered. "We'll keep looking," Santos promised. "Now that we know we have a better idea of what the thought, we'll find her. We'll bring Jessica home." Robert nodded slowly. After 36 years, he finally learned the truth about his daughter's disappearance. But the most important question, where she was, remained unanswered. The case of Jessica Lynn Caldwell officially closed as a solved homicide in October 2023. But the search for her remains continuous. Robert Caldwell, despite his advanced age, participates in every search effort organized by law enforcement, determined to give his daughter the midnight blue prom dress that had made Jessica look like a princess on the last night of her life now sits in an evidence lab, a silent witness to a tragedy that devastated the family and haunted the community for nearly 4 decades. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the answers must come too late to provide the truth we need, but that the search for truth, no matter how painful, is always worth pursuing. Tommy Brown, now in his 50s and living in Cincinnati, learned about the case resolution through news reports. He'd never married, never fully moved past the guilt he felt about letting Jessica walk away from him. When contacted by reporters, he declined to comment, but those who knew him said the news brought him a measure of peace he'd been searching for since 1987. Amy Patterson, Jessica's best friend, had kept in touch with the Caldwell family over the years, despite living in California. She flew back to Ohio when she heard about the dress discovery, spending a weekend with Robert Caldwell, sharing memories of Jessica and looking through old photographs. She would have done amazing things, Amy said, holding a picture of Jessica in her graduation photo. A photo taken from a yearbook, but never used because Jessica had disappeared before graduation. She had so many plans, so much life ahead of her. The story of Jessica Lynn Caldwell's disappearance and the discovery of her prom dress 36 years later serves as a reminder of how many families live with unresolved grief, how many questions go unanswered for decades. It illustrates both the persistence required to solve cold cases and the tragic reality that sometimes answers come too late for those who need them most. For the residents of Millbrook, Ohio, Jessica's case has become part of the town's permanent memory. The community centre where she attended her last dance still hosts props and photo kits, but there's a small wall near the entrance dedicated to her memory. The Five and Dime, where she worked part-time, closed in the 1990s, but the building still stands, a reminder of simpler times before the community learned that tragedy could strike anywhere. Robert Caldwell continues to live alone on the farm where Jessica grew up, tending to a smaller herd of cattle and maintaining the property with help from neighbours. Jessica's bedroom remains unchanged, her college acceptance letter still on her desk, her dried corsage still pinned to the mirror. He's donated her prom dress to the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation's Cold Case Unit, hoping it might help solve other missing persons cases. Jessica always wanted to help people, Robert said during a recent interview. Maybe her story will help victims find witnesses they have. The search for Jessica's remains continues, coordinated by Detective Santos and supported by volunteer search groups throughout the ground-penetrating radar has been used to examine several properties associated with Carl Henderson, and investigators continue to review his trucking records and route information from 1987, looking for clues about where he might have disposed of Jessica's body. Until Jessica Lynn Caldwell is found and brought home, her story remains incomplete. But the discovery of her midnight blue prom dress, after 36 years of mystery, has provided her family with something they've almost given up hope of finding. The truth about what happened on the night a 19-year-old girl, with her whole life ahead of her, walked around the corner of the community centre and into the gardens, never to be seen again. The case stands as a testament to the dedication of investigators who refuse to give up on cold cases, the resilience of families who endure decades of uncertainty, and the power of communities to remember and honour those who are lost. Jessica's story continues to unfold, even now, as the search for her final resting place goes on, driven by the hope that someday soon she'll finally come home. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's diner buzzed overhead as Rebecca Roche wiped down the last table of her evening shift. It was October 14th, 1994, and the small-town diner in Cedar Falls, Ohio, was nearly empty except for old Pete nursing his fourth cup of coffee at the corner booth. At 20 years old, Rebecca had been working at Murphy's for 2 years, saving every penny for nursing school while living with her parents on Maple Street. Her orphan parents took her to the ponytail, and despite the exhaustion showed in her memoirs, she managed to hold a smile for Pete as she refilled his cup. Are you heading home soon, Becky? Pete asked his girl. So, just finishing up, Mr. Henderson. Drive safe. That's a good way. Outside, the October wind rattled the ground's windows, and dark clouds gathered over the swirling hills. Rebecca had always loved walking in Cedar Falls, the way the maple trees lined Main Street with their brilliant lights and colors, but tonight, something felt different. Maybe it was the approaching storm, or maybe it was the restlessness she'd been feeling. The urge to break free from the routine that had defined her life since graduating high school. Before we continue with Rebecca's story, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. These mysterious disappearance cases take countless hours to research and present. Your support means everything to us. Also, please let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers from around the world. Now, let's get back to that fateful October evening in 1994. Rebecca hung up her apron in the small employee break room and grabbed her denim jacket from the hook by the back door. Her manager, Frank Rodriguez, was counting the till at the front counter when she called out, "I'm heading out, Frank. See you tomorrow. Take care, Rebecca. That storm's supposed to hit around midnight." She pushed through the back door into the alley behind Murphy's, her breath visible in the crisp air. Her 1987 Honda Civic was parked under a single streetlight, keys jingling in her hand as she approached. The familiar routine of locking up the diner, walking to her car, and making the 12-minute drive home to her parents' house on Maple Street had become as natural as breathing. But tonight, Rebecca paused beside her car, looking up at the dark sky. Her parents, David and Linda Walsh, were probably watching the evening news in their living room, waiting for her to come home so they could hear about her day. Robert, 17, a senior in senior photos, would be upstairs doing homework or talking on the phone with his girlfriend. It was a peaceful, predictable life in a town where everyone knew everyone, where the biggest excitement usually came from the high school football games on Friday nights. Rebecca slid behind the wheel of her Honda and started the engine. The radio crackled to life, playing a Sheryl Crow song that had been climbing the charts. As she pulled out of the alley onto Main Street, she noticed how empty the town looked. Most of the shops had closed hours ago, their darkened windows reflecting her headlights as she drove past. The only signs of life were the warm yellow glows coming from house windows, families settling in for the evening. She stopped at the four-way intersection of Main and Cedar, the only traffic light in town blinking yellow due to the late hour. This was where she would normally turn right to head home, but something made her hesitate. Maybe it was the conversation she'd had with her best friend Amy earlier that day about treatments and taking chances. Maybe it was just the restless energy through 20 and feeling like life was passing her by in this small town. Instead of turning right toward Maple Street,
Well, Doctor, he is feeling suspicion and of these treated people, and they're only questions to whether it's appreciate, if it's nice, it's the darker. We're at a point for you to run and have friends to do it, but it's still in sort of the original part of it where we're going to fly. But as we are, how many of us are feeling good on? So the philosophy and it says before, and you see how it you go to the mall and not give their money, they're not help. You know, give you the stick. It's all the captain. It's all it. Yeah. It's all ways you expect that tell the guilt like our family. I'm showing you how it's real true. Hello. You know, see, it's written yourself. And you have talked up time. Brought up talked up. Logic. Kidney. Okay. And then 7 people up. Wrap it up. One thing is how people used to live in the Republic of Rome, where Rome is a republic. America too. But then democracy is more. Not democracy world, not rule, not defined and profit. That is what death in one life. That's why George Bush is so keen to wait, bring them up, get a crack. Yeah, not rule. Just beat them up. We're going to tell you what to do. We're going to kill 3 million of you, and you just have to shut up and we just want oil. You must perpetuate oil. Do nothing about freedom. You must oh, you can't talk much. There should be no. You want to have a war, yeah. Not those beautiful young boys who've been indoctrinated. Not the things like one of their enemies. It's still quite right. There's a Muslim coming in the door. It's always new. They're saying now, the picture you saw before was the galactic plane. That's the galactic plane in the Milky Way. Right? And but I'm doing it to be the stars because we don't see how thin the Milky Way really is. It's thin. It's like this, exactly like that. That's the Milky Way. We see it like we don't see it like a spiral galaxy.